Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guests this week are Gail Maurice and Melanie Bray. You might recognize Gail from her roles in Cardinal, Trickster, Barkskins, and Night Raiders, among other things, and she'll next be seen in Marie Clement's Bones of Crows. Melanie has turned up in The L Word, Suk-Yin Lee's Year of the Carnivore, and Quebecsit. And now she stars in Gail's directorial debut, Rosie, as Fred, a struggling artist in 80s Montreal who finds herself reluctantly taking in her late sister's little girl, leading to a relationship that changes both their lives. After premiering at TIFF earlier this fall, Rosie opens across Canada this Friday, November 11th. Gail and Melanie picked Jojo Rabbit, Taika Waititi's Oscar-winning adaptation of Kristin Lunen's novel Caging Skies, starring Roman Griffin Davis as a bright-eyed, enthusiastic young Nazi in 1944 Germany, much to the disgust of his mother, played by Scarlett Johansson. But this is a story about hero worship and celebrity culture, and Jojo is so steeped in the propaganda of the Third Reich that he imagines Adolf Hitler, played by Waititi, as an enthusiastic buddy. And when Jojo's illusions are challenged by his discovery that his mother has been hiding a Jewish girl, played by Thomasin McKenzie, in their home, well, that's when things get real. Brutally real. This is Someone Else's Movie.
So I love Jojo Rabbit, and I've known Taika for a long time, just through Imaginative, like being on the board of Imaginative, and like all his films screened at Imaginative, and like Boy and Hunt for the Wilder People. You know, it's like, yeah. So I've known his work and him as a person for some time, but then, and I like the way he is in person. Like he's just, he's very witty, but he's also super intelligent. And I was at he did a talk once, and I listened to him and explain about filmmaking, and it was like he was cracking jokes, but at the same time we were learning so much. And Jojo Rabbit, I saw it like 4 times, and I rarely see a movie more than once. And I love it because most of his films use children, and so does Rosie. And I think he has a huge inner child in him, and so do I. And that's something I really connect with and bond with. And I love that he tackled such heavy topics in Jojo Rabbit, and using humor, you know, and absurdism, like being Hitler, and it's just so funny. I think it's the best way, you know, to get people to actually understand and see how ridiculous certain things are, you know?
Yeah. I mean, besides that, of course, the writing is brilliant, the visuals, everything. But yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is what Gail was just starting to touch on, which is, I know is very controversial for some people. They didn't appreciate the comedy with the issues of Nazism. But I think that there's a way to do comedy and satire right that takes away the power from people who don't deserve power and things that don't deserve power. So for me, that's what's really interesting and sort of at the top of my mind.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch the backlash happening now, right? Like only in the last few months, I think there's been some sort of feeling that maybe after Love and Thunder that Taika's being overexposed, or that his thing is, something can only be so cool for so long before it starts to get picked at. And I just remember, I've interviewed him a number of times, and I remember the feeling of watching Jojo Rabbit, which was like I think it was either the first or second of 2 back-to-back TIFF press screenings I had on the Tuesday in 2019 in the Scotiabank. They were in the same theater back-to-back, and one of them was Joker, which I loathed, and the other one was Jojo Rabbit, which is like, oh, this is a People's Choice winner. This is going to be massive. This is a huge statement movie from him, and it does feel like a leveling up of his vision. But what amazed me watching it again was how earnest it is, like how there is sarcasm in there, and it's satirical in that there are characters who are caricatures of a certain thing. And the casting is also deliberate, like casting Stephen Merchant as Gestapo is going to make that weird and unpredictable and make you wonder how to see it. But the vision is so consistent and the point of it is so clear that, like, it's not comedy Hitler. It's a child's understanding of, like, the whole point is that it's the opposite of The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, right? Like, have either of you seen?
Yeah.
So you know, right? It's a film that ultimately that's an unfilmable novel anyway, because the whole thing depends on the reader not understanding about the Holocaust and filling in the blanks and learning more. But that movie was just such a complete whitewash, seems like the wrong term, but it's a film where you're saying, no, it's totally possible for a kid to grow up in Nazi Germany as a commandant's son and not know. And the whole point of Jojo Rabbit is how actively Jojo is trying not to know, and how the film is so conscious about the wool coming away from his eyes, and how Taika's performance as imaginary Hitler is actually crucial to that, right? Because he starts off as an enthusiastic kid, and by the end he's a bully, and he's the Hitler that a child should have perceived of Hitler if he wasn't raised in the stew of propaganda and all of that other stuff. And the idea that somehow that can be that to say, oh, Jojo Rabbit was dumb, it was made Hitler a cartoon, is just to completely ignore everything that he's doing. And it's exactly what you're saying. Like, he's cracking jokes and giving you this remarkably textured, intelligent worldview. And yeah, watching people actively reject that now, especially years later, like 3 years later, has just been incredibly frustrating for me.
Yeah. It's like, even the way, so at the beginning when it all starts and they're playing a Beatles song.
I Want to Hold Your Hand. Yeah.
And then they're showing like the propaganda videos, and it just diminishes it, but it also makes it like, you see how the fanaticism was like massive, and how this control, how much control he had, and the same, like, people when they went to a Beatles concert experienced the same thing, right?
The fanaticism,
but it's like playing with that idea, but by doing so visually, he makes it like, he makes us see how ridiculous it all is. But also, it's like in the Hitler that he plays, the nuances of it, the acting, like when he starts to get scared, and when he sees Jojo starting to, like, that's the brilliance of it too, with the little the child Roman, seeing his mind and the way he's starting to, like, realize, hey, maybe this isn't right, and and then how Hitler comes back, his imaginary Hitler comes back and gets fearful because he's seeing Jojo, having his own ability to think things through, and it's so beautiful. And the shots, I love his shots, are like the wide shots in the room, like, it's like the characters on both sides of the screen, and how they come together and go apart and sit on the floor. And the colors, it's just so, I love it. Yeah, I really love it. And, even after, before the bombing hits and all that, and it gets really desaturated, really, really gray, really, it's something is about to happen. And then, whereas before there's like those beautiful yellows and greens, and so his world is shifting,
Yeah, it's reductive, obviously, but he learns to see. He's understanding who the world is, and there's so many movies about a child's perspective that overdo it, right? Like, they push too hard with the music or the cinematography, and there's a delicacy to what he does, and a steadiness, a sure hand, just a confidence in the filmmaking that it's going to be an enveloping world, and that you really, there is no way out. Like, we don't get to leave it until Jojo does, until he realizes what's going on. And that allows for the comedy, the range of performances, obviously, what Sam Rockwell is doing, which I think is great, because his sardonic take his sarcasm registers to us in the audience. We understand who this guy is way before obviously Jojo does, but also we can also understand that no one else around him is paying any attention to him either. And he's just checked out. He's a hero who isn't happy with being a hero. He knows it's all over, and maybe he gets an honorable decision here or there, but he's been like long since removed of any responsibility. And that gives you a recognizable format for the story. I get that too. Like part of it is just building these recognizable, comfortable, like sitcom premises almost that we can plug into, and then exploding them just the way, everything Scarlett Johansson does is slightly angry or slightly sad. And then Thomasin McKenzie gets to have all the rage, to get the real justifiable fury as the Jewish girl in the cupboard who, again, we see her humanity way before Jojo's does. But the joke of those scenes is that he's assuming any kind of superiority just because that's what he's been watching, right? Like he's been taught that he's in charge, but he is, he blew himself up on his first day of Hitler Youth Camp. This is not, it is not capable of anything.
Yeah. No, do you have anything?
Yeah, well, I feel like this is 10 minutes ago, but yeah, just thinking about how, the movie is it's also about not following the pack, right? So going back to just how it starts, which I only really picked up on the last time with that Beatles song and the fanaticism, and that we can sort of, that combination of the Nazis and the Beatles and a concert, and that you can just kind of get caught up in following a pack in anything. And sometimes it's a positive, we could say that as a music thing, and Elvis Presley or Beatles or whatever, that it's harmless and positive, but then it's so easy to do the exact same thing for something that is clearly hugely problematic and frightening. So I was just thinking about that before we were talking about that.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite little characters is his friend.
Oh my God, me too.
Again, it's like kids are, they see the world in such a, I guess, an innocent way. So like Rosie, right? It's and Us and my other film, it's children. Why I like telling stories from their perspective is because they are non-judgmental, except in Jojo's case, he's non-judgmental really, because he knows this Jewish girl is like supposed to be a demon from what he's learned, but at the same time his heart is open. And then it's like children are so able to see beyond, like adults, we're just so already I guess told and conservative and afraid. Children aren't afraid.
Yeah,
I think that's what it's about. It's as well as like Jojo is really a hero, and I don't know. I just there's just so much in the film that I love. Like even like the shoes, every time we saw Scarlett Johansson, like the shoes were at a certain level when they were red. And it was all leading up to, seeing it at that level when he finds them, right? So, and that wide shot of her and Jojo with the steps, it's like, okay, so there's so many layers of the film. Like when you think about it, you can peel them back.
There's a lot of symbolism, which actually is one of the things that I appreciate the most about Gail's work. Like she'll just always surprise me where I'm just like, oh, like in Rosie, Jigger is the most grounded. So he's always sitting close to the ground. Like she just has like all these, some are more obvious than others. And Gail's just really good at that. But yeah, she's made me definitely, we all pick up on some, but now I feel like through working with her on her last few films that I'm always picking up on even more and more. And yeah, like you said, the stairs, now that scene where Jojo was with his mom in those steps. I mean, I think it's just a beautiful shot, but then also I could get into all kinds of things like stairs up to heaven and all of these different things. Yeah. And then, but you said something yesterday too about how you love the shoes, because when, spoiler alert, when he does find her, that there's great power in not showing anything super gory and just staying at that level, which I also thought was a really beautiful point. And that part is so heartbreaking to just have him. And then that repeat of the shoelaces as well, right?
It worked for me because it's so, the kid is so good. Like we don't need to see. And I think part of it too is that he can't process the body any further. So that's where the frame ends. And it just rocks us, it just locks us right into his perspective, where we've been the whole time, obviously. But this is something that, of all the other things that have been going on, that we've sort of been noticing, even like the camera doesn't want to show us the rest of it. It just can't. It's just too cruel. And it's one of those things where, again, restraint can feel like pandering, but it just doesn't. It is so much his sensibility in that moment to be kind, right, to the audience, to leave it out and let it sit. Like, there's no pretending that we're not seeing what we're seeing, but there are dozens of other filmmakers who would just pan up, right, and or go for an elaborate effect or some sort of stark pull away where we just see all the bodies hanging and he's alone in the center. It's not necessary, and he gets it. He knows that.
It's just quiet. He leaves us quiet with him. And what I love is, so that then what happens is, like, there's no dialogue. It's just like Jojo is silent and with that image. And then the next thing is he grabs the knife and, like, he's so angry, and there's still no dialogue. There's still no dialogue. And yet they understand each other, and then he just sobs on the ground and she goes to him, and it's just held on a wide, and it's just, you see it, and the character just comes in, and it's just quite a quiet moment that, again, it doesn't need to be elaborate. It allows us to stay with them, and there's so many beautiful moments like that. Like, even when, he's missing his dad, it's just a wide on the living room, and you see them dancing. It just takes in the surrounding, the quiet surrounding.
It's interesting because in some ways, some might say he can be so over the top, like in Taika's interpretation of that. There's huge moments. They're like ridiculous, yet brilliant. Like, I absolutely love his comedic timing and his acting. But then, he does know, as you're both saying, when to have that restraint, when to actually choose the moments where nothing even needs to be said or shown. So, it's really beautiful that you can find that balance.
Well, even when Jojo was seeing, like, the shoes, and then it goes away to the houses with the eyes,
Oh yeah.
So it's like the world is seeing everything. It's the world is watching, and the world is taking notice, and the world will have this memory. And I think that's part of it, as well as it was such a time in the world that was so unbelievable and tragic. And when you go to Germany and you talk to people, some people say they genuinely didn't know it was happening. And I go, what? How could you not know? It was like, and they go, they hit it so well, but it's so hard for us to understand that, right? It's,
Yeah. I'm sure there are people who can argue that if they didn't personally burn any books, they weren't responsible, right? They just showed up at the rally, or they knew the rally was going on and they didn't attend. But I get it. I mean, there are so many horrors, so many institutional organized horrors that we can just disconnect from. I mean, even Rosie deals with a piece of the 60s scoop, right? Or the fallout from it, which is something. I was born in 1968. I've grown up knowing about all of it. I get it. Like, I know as a white Canadian, I'm probably responsible for some level of institutional or systematic. I'm trying not to be, but it's the sort of thing that it existed before I was born, and I was raised in that. Like, that's there, and it's something to be addressed and dealt with. And so when the latest revelation comes up of the mass graves, or when the Pope comes to visit, it's just like, you can't say you didn't know now. There's no one left who can say they were unaware of all of this stuff. Yeah. But also, and this is a weird way to come back to Jojo Rabbit, strangely enough, I was raised Jewish. My parents were Jewish, and Taika is half Jewish. And watching him play Hitler is so loaded and blew past so many people. But it is a form of reclamation. Like, it's a way of saying that this dead asshole has no power over me, and I'm going to play him as a comic character. I'm going to make fun of him for the grown-ups in the room while still playing into the kids' vision of it. And that's such a tightrope walk. Yeah.
I think that's what he said too, is like, he's probably rolling over in his grave like a Jewish person playing him, right? It's like, but I mean, it's like, it's such a like self-loathing that he had, because his mom or something was Jewish. Hitler's mom was Jewish or something as well.
Oh, Hitler's grandmother was supposedly Jewish. Yeah. Ron Rosenbaum wrote a really great book about that. Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to tell you about the Shiny Things newsletter, my twice-weekly dispatch about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming thing. Last week, I reviewed a pair of theatrical releases, Charlotte Will's After Sun and Martin McDonagh's The Banshees of Inisherin, and this week I tackle the home editions of Top Gun Maverick and Jordan Peele's Nope, among others. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Simcast Twitter account. Did you miss my writing? I did too. Come check it out. Only not since maybe Mel Brooks Made the Producers had there been something that pointed about the pervasive influence that the iconography of Hitler has. And then the producers turned it into shtick, especially in the stage play where there's just like dancing, not like everything goes on longer because it's a stage play and they have more production numbers and that stuff. But here it kind of made me question just how comfortable we've all been with the depiction of Nazi regalia in films, and Jojo Rabbit sort of brings it back again to make it play as it's an element of intimidation. The swastikas everywhere and the uniforms, and just the fact that everything in Berlin by the time the movie starts towards the end of the war is gray and blasted and ruined. That the swastika, the red on the swastika, has the most color of almost anything over and over and over again. It really does play into the subconscious or the subliminal appeal of symbolism for people who don't have anything. And you see it through Jojo's eyes. So you understand that he idolizes it and he's cartooning it and he's it's something he desires. And then gradually it just becomes poison to him as well, or becomes visible as poison to him. And that's something that's just done entirely through cinematography. It's never mentioned. It's never discussed. It's just presented to us as something that is less and less and less appealing. And that's brilliant. There is no scene where somebody tears it up or the Christopher Plummer ripping up the flag from Sound of Music, which is totally great there. But again, we don't need it. We just need to experience it through Jojo's perspective without any additional pushing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's
like, in much the same way that in Rosie, we have that scene where a child is taken to a scrapyard to sleep because the apartment's not available. Fred takes Rosie to her favorite car. And it's a quiet moment where we get to understand just how desperate Fred feels, but Rosie is enraptured because she's given a way to process it that later then becomes so important to her that, that's my car, don't destroy my car. It's so simple. You never draw a line under it, but it's there and you can't, there's no way to miss what's going on. But the movie just lets it play. Right? You know the audience will get that. It's the trust in us that makes it work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what he's brilliant at as well. Is he doesn't pound us over the head with explanation, and the visuals, like he trusts the visuals. He knows what story he wants to tell. And even the Jewish girl, what's her name? I forget her name.
The actor, Thomasin McKenzie.
Yeah, even when she says, you're not a Nazi, you just want to belong to a club.
Yeah.
And it's so true. And that's most people in gangs just want to be part of a club, of a family, right? His dad is gone, so he just wants to belong, even though he doesn't understand it. And that's, I think, one of the most powerful ways that these warmongers or whatever know what to tap into. Like, there's people all over the world that are using children, and Hitler was just one of them. And it just shows, I guess, it's just they're just innocent and thinking they don't realize what they're joining and what it means, and then to see that realization happen slowly in Jojo is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because he thought it was just a club kind of thing. He doesn't realize, like, he can't even kill a rabbit, He's not a killer. He just thought it was fun.
Yeah, he's 10. He doesn't understand the murder part or the genocide part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There is the argument too with specifically with Trump, but also with the Canadian analogs, the people who are trying to be the new Trump, and all the American would-bes as well, where they're just content to say, I hate what you hate. I don't like the things you don't like, so stand with me. And it's I was going to say it's dangerous, but it's worse than that, because it's a cynical manipulation of people who feel powerless and are just looking for something to be mad at. So if you say, I like the things you like, that's nice, but I hate the things you hate means, oh, cool. So you don't know half the stuff I hate, but I bet you hate that too. And then eventually, whoever that is, Trump or anybody else, is going to have to say, oh yeah, sure, I hate that too. And then it just keeps building.
And that's exactly like, I guess the people that don't like Jojo is because, they're the ones that would follow Hitler, would follow the Trumps, would follow, blindly, right? And those are the ones that are probably criticizing as well. Like, I don't know, like you were saying, there was like a lot of criticism in the last 4 months. I haven't heard it, but also I think it's a story to show how dangerous it is and how idiotic and stupid it is to blindly follow one person, to not question and not use your own mind. Even a 10-year-old can figure it out. So somebody asked me why, like in Rosie, there's like poignant moments, there's sad moments, but at the next scene you're crying, and then the next scene you're laughing. And somebody asked me why I do that. But in Indigenous culture, like we can be at a wake, we can be at a funeral, which they last for 3 days, but we're playing cards, we're laughing, we're telling jokes, and people say, okay. Why are you so happy? Like, and you're, like, the world is falling apart and you can smile and stuff. But that's the whole point, I think, is we're not going to let anything beat us. So we're going to fucking smile. We're going to fucking smile. You know what I mean? And so I think it's like, for Jojo or I think the way, I don't really, I know him, but I haven't seen him in years and years or talked to him like for a long time. But sometimes that's the way you have to get by in life. Is it doesn't mean you're not affected by what's going on around you. It doesn't mean you're not weeping and you're not angry and you're not, resentful of everything that's going on, but that doesn't do anything, so why not make art has satire in it, that has comedy in it, but is telling like a profound story, That's what I love about his work. And Jojo.
I think if you can't communicate the gravity of the situation without jokes as well, like if making a joke would destroy what you're doing, you're not doing it very well. I think about, like, even, this is a weird leap, but even Schindler's List has a couple of mordant jokes mostly from Ben Kingsley, whose character is the accountant who's way in over his head and can only laugh at the situation he's in, ironically, while still actively working to save thousands of people. Gallows humor is kind of a natural reflex at this point. And certainly if you're dealing with something as big as, the Nazi indoctrination process, which is ludicrous on its face. Yeah, if you can't point and laugh from the outside, or you can't understand that characters on the inside would still be, I mean, again, it's Scarlett Johansson's role, right? Like, she's constantly mocking things, but she never phrases it in the frame of a joke. She's just quietly pointing out to this poor child she's living with that he maybe shouldn't be listening to the people in the fascist suit. She does it like it comes from a place of love, and it comes from a place of concern. She gets angry with him, but she understands that if she pushes him any harder, he'll turn away. And she has to keep holding out hope.
And that's what I think is brilliant and beautiful about that, her character as well, and how Taika wrote it, is she knows that she trusts her son enough. She trusts Jojo enough and his intelligence that she trusts that he's going to get it eventually. And because no matter what she says, and, against Nazism, that he needed to find out and learn on his own, and I think that's what's beautiful about those characters and the way they work together, is we see the beauty of Scarlett Johansson's character because she loves him so much that she allows him to be who he is, and it's like, it's subtle, but parents understand, humans understand that.
And I want to ask you, Melanie, about playing an unwanting parent figure in the same way, in that your arc is kind of, we won't spoil it, but to go all the way around from being repulsed by the idea of having a child around, but to then realizing that she's become the most important thing in Fred's life. Is there a way to play that sort of parental instinct without overdoing it? I mean, is there a trick of, like, just keeping it in? How do you not telegraph it to the camera, or is it all just a trust game between the two of you with the editing and the direction?
That's a really interesting question, because I have this whole world in my mind about Fred, and I forget that no one knows about it.
Okay.
Like, I literally wrote, a 10-page biography. I know details about things like how did Rosie's mom die and our whole upbringing, and all of Fred's insecurities and wounds and what happened to her, all these things that I've created in my mind that seem so real to me. And then I forget until you ask me a question like that, oh, right, nobody knows any of that. So they might be seeing someone who just doesn't want to be a parent. But for me, it wasn't even about that. It was actually, Fred from the beginning feels just really responsible and guilty for having left Rosie's mom when they were kids, and not, Fred's quite a bit older than Rosie's mom was. And I ran away from home is my backstory, and I never went back for her, and I never took care of her. And then, so this child gets sprung on me at the beginning of the film. And I mean, not only do I have sort of, an unsteady income, issues with a place to live, but I'm just like, I can't take on this responsibility. And I've heard some people say that they get mad at Fred, which I'm like, oh, that's also really interesting, because of course I don't see her as a bad person. I think it's responsible of her to say, like, that I can't take on this responsibility. And she's also saying, like, go find her Indigenous family. She deserves that, which unfortunately is not as simple as it sounds, mind you. So it's all coming from a place, I'm not even thinking, oh, she doesn't want to be a parent. I'm thinking she feels unworthy of having her own family and love, She has all of these abandonment issues herself. She can't realistically care for a child. The child should be with the family she was ripped away from, essentially. So in terms of the arc, the biggest thing also is, Rosie grows on her, but also because, like Gail said, Rosie's so non-judgmental and worms her way into all three of the adults' hearts and gives them something they didn't even know they were missing, And I think what's important about Gail's story is that my character, there's no like white savior story. Obviously, there would never be with Gail having written it, but it also spins that whole narrative on its head because to me, a lot of people said, who's the protagonist really? It's called Rosie, but is Rosie the protagonist? Is Fred the protagonist? And we sort of had a lot of talks about that when it was being developed. And it was like, well, it's both of them, but also it's called Rosie because it's what Rosie actually, it's not about Rosie getting saved. It's about how Rosie saves these three adults, including Fred. So I could go on, but that's just some of it. Does that even answer your question?
It does. Yeah, it does. And Gail too, structurally, you have to kind of, like Jojo Rabbit, there is a recognizable story that you're using to sneak in all the commentary and all the, not even sneak in, it's floating right on top of it, but you've layered a fairly recognizable template with specificity and like really, really precise pain and the idea of being seen keeps coming back and people and Rosie just when, oh God, I've forgotten his name.
Jigger.
Flo.
Flo.
Yeah. When Flo comes in dressed in a suit and Rosie can't handle it because she knows who Flo is.
Yeah.
That's something, again, you had to know that would land, but you also, that's where the film has been taking us the whole time. You've paved the way for that because of how Rosie responds to literally everybody she interacts with. So was that something you always knew you could do, or did that just evolve while you were writing it? Like her ability to see.
I'm not sure. I wrote it because I wanted her character not to be judging in any way. And what happened, which is she never once questioned who Flo and Mo were and why they dressed the way they dressed. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted. And she never once questioned Fred and sleeping in the car. She doesn't question those things. So, and she does see Fred as an artist. She does see Fred's art as beautiful more before Fred actually does believe it herself, right? So
the next Basquiat.
What's that?
The next Basquiat.
Yeah. And so I knew that Rosie would always be able to see through the adults, and it's how kids are, right? We can try that. That's why some people are afraid of children, to be alone with children, because they say the truth, and so and she's going to say the truth when she comes out in his suit.
Yeah, it's such a pure moment, and it's part of the larger thing about childhood too, where so often movies just depict children as passive, and there are a whole bunch of movies at TIFF right now about kids who are hostages to their parents, like who are completely subject to what the adults do, and whether or not they reconcile themselves to it and learn from it, or whether they just collapse under that pressure is such a part of it. But Rosie, as the movie rather than the character, just sort of skips right past that because Rosie is completely powerless. It opens with her having nothing. And so everything is a new thing. And her perspective is so simple that she's just going to accept as you say, like she's going to take whatever comes, but it's not because she has to, she chooses to, in a way that maybe she doesn't even understand, but that's the thing that saves her. And then it saves everyone else. And Jojo Rabbit is the opposite. Jojo Rabbit is a movie about a kid who won't see what's real until he's forced to, and resisted kicking and screaming the whole way. But we still root for both of them, because obviously they're the children, they're the protagonists, they're the ones we're stuck with. The camera follows them, and we can't help but root for them. But I think the greater risk for Rosie is whether or not she's going to be okay at the end of this, because it feels like society isn't supporting, like there isn't a war going on for her attention the way there is in Jojo Rabbit. He's just not aware of it. Rosie is the kind of kid who, in a bunch of different ways, could fall through the cracks, as so many of the characters around her have. And you as the filmmaker, sorry, I'm trying to articulate this in a way that's clearly lumpy. You refuse to see her that way. There's no pity, right? There's no sense that, oh, poor kid. No, she's having a great time. She just doesn't, she gets mad when she has to, but she just doesn't feel like she's being pitied. And so she doesn't start looking for it.
Yeah. That was always my intention. I in real life, I can't stand when adults talk to children in any other way than they would, to another human being, because they are little human beings. So I made sure that the characters all spoke to her, and even offering her street smarts and like a sucker. It's just like they're just treating her like she's just like this little human being that's entered their lives, and no lesser than. And that's one of the things I love about Jigger's character too. He's one of my favorite characters. Is she sees him and with no pity whatsoever. And because for me, he's one of the strongest ones in the film, like one of the strongest characters and one of the most grounded and one of the most he's fearless, and he also has all his culture and his identity inside of him, and that's how him and Rosie are going to move forward in life. Yeah.
I just thought of this is a non sequitur, but I got excited because I just remembered. So we were talking about symbolism before, and some of the ones I said in the film are more obvious than others. But ever since Gail and I co-produced the short Rosie, the butterfly has been a big symbol. Oh, yeah. And Gail was telling me about in Indigenous culture, butterflies are your ancestors, right? So they're around you, they're protecting you. So they're on her shoes, which we reused the same shoes in the feature, and you see it more in the future when I paint the mural and things like that. But then that moment
hanging over her bed.
Yeah, they're hanging over her bed, and it's on in the short on the busker's T-shirt. So she's kind of drawn to her because there's a bit of the mom element there and the spirit. But when we just rewatched JoJo, it hadn't clicked until the butterfly is what leads him to the mom in the shoes, right? Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, is it also in Maori culture? Like, is Taika doing that on purpose? And I wanted to ask
the butterfly being his mom's spirit. Right?
Yeah, it's what leads him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, these things echo for a reason, right? Like they're resonant. And quietly beautiful. And I was about to ask if there's anything from Jojo Rabbit that you might have lifted or borrowed for Rosie, but that's pretty poetic, if it is.
I didn't even notice. I didn't even know Melanie just said that, but it might be, like you say, that's their symbol of a spirit as well.
My thanks to Gail Maurice and Melanie Bray, whose film Rosie opens in theaters across Canada this Friday, November 11th. Thanks also to Winnie Wong. She knows what she did. Melanie's not on Twitter, but you can find Gail there at PISIM, and you can follow the movie at Rosie_the_film. You can find Jojo Rabbit on 4K, Blu-ray, and DVD from Walt Disney Home Entertainment, and streaming on Disney Plus and Crave in Canada, and Fubo, DirecTV, and Sling in the US, as well as being available to rent or buy on various VOD platforms. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the podcast is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll like it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you've been enjoying it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next week.